Welcome to the Popish Plot. I'm Nate.
And I'm Jessica.
Today, continuing our series on sin, we're going to be talking about greed. Which makes Jessica sad because much like you may have heard in both Pride and Humility, she really likes the animal theme. And there is no animal theme for greed.
But wait.
Oh, you got one?
I have a tangent one.
Okay, I'll let it slide. What you got?
Well, I'm sure we're going to disagree with this.
Yes,
but
probably.
there is a very famous quote of something about like, ladies and gentlemen, greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
By Gordon Gekko.
Yes.
I don't. While he does count as being an animal, I don't think it's quite the animal reference you're looking for.
True. Real geckos aren't as slimy as he was.
Correct. And since this is the subject on sin, I think we can say with unwavering authority that Gordon Gekko's wrong.
Well, I believe the writers wanted to make him an anti-hero and was completely surprised when a bunch of people said, I want to be him when I grow up.
Yes. He is the bad guy of the movie. But so, as we've done before, we'll go ahead and we'll get into the definition. So greed, or as they called it in Latin, avarice, is defined by Merriam-Webster as selfish and excessive desire for more of something than is needed, such as money. But as they put fairly well, money is not the only problem with greed. It's simply that in our culture, which looks upon everything in terms of money and capital and commercialization and monetization, money tends to be the most prominent fall guy for that.
So this isn't like Pride where the definition was completely useless? This is actually like a good working definition?
Yeah, this is actually a reasonable definition. The only real problem is in our viewpoints. Because money, and in some cases power, are the easiest graphics to use to demonstrate greed, it's the thing that we most commonly see when greed is being depicted in movies or books or other things.
Well, it would be really, boring to have a thing in which someone was super greedy about, collecting commemorative spoons.
Right. But realistically, that's exactly, that could just as easily be greed. I found, when I was researching this, I found one quote I really liked. It was by a German psychologist by the name of Erich Fromm, who said that greed is a bottomless pit which exhausts the person in an endless effort to satisfy the need without ever reaching satisfaction. Greed is that thing. You'll never get enough of whatever the thing is that greed's got you chasing. I once had a boss who, while talking about how this new change in the way that we did business was going to mean more money coming in, and that was going to mean more money for everybody else, and anybody who wanted to could happily tell him when they've had enough. I never got enough, but that's because for the most part, I was actually so far enough down on that by the time it was trickling to me, it was pennies. Or fractions of pennies. I really never saw any more money out of that. But, his whole point is you're never really going to get enough of the thing that you're greedy for.
And I do like this quote, too, simply because it helps showcase the difference between being greedy and, being driven towards something.
Sure.
Because you could have some thing you wanted to do that, maybe you were a really good athlete and your goal was to do the Olympics. You have a set ending and you're like, this is something I'm good at. This is very good for that. So this is my goal.
Yeah. Or you've got something something specific that you would like to maybe own or /do. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to go on a European vacation.
And pet all the wild animals of Europe.
And so you go and you figure out
bears.
How much it's going to cost. And you begin saving money for that. You take on extra side jobs that you can to help get more money so that you can get to that goal. Greed, as a general rule, is almost never goal-based. And even when it is, the goal tends to either be nebulous, or basically it's not really clear what the goal is. I want to be more powerful. Okay, but how much more? Or it tends to be something that's constantly reiterating itself. I want to be a city councilman. Now I want to be the mayor. Now I want to be the governor. Now I want to be a senator. Now I want to be a president. It's this ever moving forward kind of a thing. You're never really,
Yes. Greed is essentially what you want more of. It is the money or the power in of itself. You might be like, my goal is to do X, but it's not, I want to be on the city council because I really care about, that giant pothole in front of my street.
Exactly.
But, because then I'll be in charge of things. And well, it turns out city councilmen don't do that.
They don't
much.
really all that in charge of all that
maybe
much.
if I'm the mayor, I'll
be in charge of
things.
Yeah. So as we do with the previous sin of pride, or did with the previous sin of pride, it's really important to focus on what damage is actually being done by greed. I mean, really, honestly, what makes it so bad? So
you turn into a jerk?
You do. In fact, that's essentially what St. Thomas Aquinas said.
I highly doubt St. Thomas Aquinas said, don't be greedy, you'll turn into a jerk.
I may be paraphrasing, but in his Summa, he actually talked about the damage it does to relationships with others, the damage it does to relationships with God, and the damage it does to oneself. And I'm going to skip the oneself because I think once you go and highlight the other two, the third one is kind of self-obvious. So, as far as it being a sin against other men, against man, once again,
it was mankind.
It's a language thing. He's referring to mankind. When when he uses the term man, he's generally referring to people.
I mean, he did have, the at that day notions based on the ancient Greeks that were completely wrong about genders, but
anyways, we are not using this language as gender specific at this point in time.
No. It's for mankind.
It was a sin directly against one's neighbor, since one man cannot overabound in external riches without another man lacking them. So basically, you can't have more than enough of something. If you look at it from an economic standpoint, the whole notion of resources is that there is a limit to them. So if there's enough resources for everybody, then if one person has more than they need, somebody else has got to have less than they need.
Yes. I mean, it does not work for all resources, but
No.
anything that has a more limited quantity.
Yes. So right there, you're being a jerk. Because you've got something that your neighbor could possibly use more of. And then he also identifies it, like I said, as a sin against God, and says that all mortal sins are a sin against God. So therefore, this one automatically qualifies. But specifically,
it is one of the deadly sins. You think that would,
but
at least in the following all the other things to be mortal sin. If you're a 5-year-old and you want your friend's candy and you're really greedy about it, you're less culpable about how
it may not qualify as having been a grave sin because you didn't really understand the full implications of your actions. But anyways, he identified it as a sin against God, and really that goes for all mortal sins. But this one in specific, he stated, inasmuch as man condemns things eternal for the sake of temporal things, it was a sin against God. So basically the whole idea is we are a composite being of spirit and matter. But at the same time, we are made to seek after things which are spiritual. So through greed, people sort of swap those two. And they stop seeking for the spiritual things as much as they are for the material things. And by doing that, they're essentially putting this thing in between them and God.
Yes, and it makes also sense in that when you read of all the various saints, they're very not greedy.
No.
Except for they are what you could almost say is very greedy in their desire of, more of God.
Yes.
But of course that is not greed, because that is, ultimately a good thing that you should be desiring.
Much like Saint Thomas Aquinas' response when he had the moment where God asked him what he would want, and his response was, "Nothing if not you."
Yes, that his servant was either very helpful or very unhelpful in saving his life's work from the fire, and so therefore we have it to read now.
Yep. Anyways, so there's really the damage of sin is it just like with pride, it's gonna go and drive this wedge in between you and God, and at the same time with you and the others with whom God intended you to share his creation. In this particular case, you are quite oftentimes happens, you are essentially creating for yourself an idol that takes the place of God. Whether it be riches or power or land, it's always something that's going to essentially create, if not a complete, then at least a partial eclipse, if you will, of God. You're putting it in between you and him, and so you can't quite get as good of a view of him. Mm-hmm. But you're also going and taking the things that that God gave you, maybe to share with others, and keeping them for yourself. So, for example, the city councilman who wants the job as city councilman, just so that way they can then go and be in charge of some things, as opposed to the person who pursues that job, so that way they can go and make changes in their community for the betterment of everybody. But like I said before, it doesn't just have to be money. It can be a lot of other things. Go down below. Hit the like button and the subscribe and that church bell next to it, so you'll get notified when our next episode coming out, which, as I've said before, if you're watching this during the season of Easter in 2020,
is tomorrow.
Also, go down below and, I don't know, maybe ask some questions about greed, or maybe answer some questions about greed.
Maybe comment on your favorite anti-hero from films that people thought was the good guy, and you went and said, wait, why would anyone think this guy's the good guy?
Yeah. Or perhaps you have an animal that you would like to have associated with greed. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed. And remember, until next time, live your faith.
Love your faith.
Share that love.